So, Miss Mendoza, at the end of our last session, we discussed the first step of trying to become more comfortable in a livelier environment by studying at the Starbucks on campus. How do you feel you did on this goal?
Well, I tried really hard to implement what we said,
Mm-hmm.
what you said, but I kept feeling overwhelmed when I got there, and I was able to order my drink. So I felt good because I normally avoid ordering in line um, because I know what to get despite looking at over the menu. I feel like I'm holding up the line too much, and I feel like the barista gets mad at me, and I feel like everyone gets mad at me, and I ended up getting peppermint mocha.
Okay, well, that's great that you were able to purchase a drink, but what happened next?
Well, while I was waiting, I saw that there weren't really any seats available except for two near this big group of students. So I put myself down and I began to study. But every time I looked up, I felt like they were staring at me and judging me and laughing at me like I was a bother because maybe I was in their way, or maybe their friend had to stand because I took their seat. I felt really anxious, so I just left after 20 minutes because I couldn't take it anymore.
Okay, so although you might not have accomplished the goal, it's clear that you made a very strong attempt, Miss Mendoza. So, how do you, how does this make you feel that you were unable to stay the desired hour?
Well, I felt disappointed in myself. I thought I could do it, and I even brought my headphones to block out the noise, but I kept feeling overwhelmed, like everyone was mad at me.
Okay, so we on this topic we've been discussing the recent anxious thoughts in our previous sessions. I want to ask you a couple of questions, but first, how would you rate the level of anxiety you feel in your life right now on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest?
Well, normally it's about a 6,
Mm-hmm.
but recently I've been feeling it's been getting bad, and it's been getting so bad that I get into my head
Mm-hmm.
and it becomes like a 7 or 8.
Okay, so this makes sense. When you find yourself possibly anticipating a negative reaction or you're in a new situation that might be stressful, the number will go up. So, how about when you were making an attempt to study at the Starbucks? How would you rate the level of anxiety you felt on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest?
Honestly, I felt like already a 7 when I walked in. And I tried to stay as long as I could, but it truly felt like a 10. And I couldn't stop thinking that everyone was making fun of me and that they didn't want me there, and I couldn't even breathe. I felt like I couldn't breathe.
I see. The anxiety you felt walking into the restaurant began to increase once you felt that those other students were making fun of you, so you believed everyone in the restaurant was as well.
Yes. And I mean, even if they weren't mad at me, the looks they gave me, I felt really, they gave me, made me feel like they were really mean, and I felt like I was doing something bad.
Okay, so when you find yourself in these situations that cause you to feel this extreme anxiety, what actions do you find yourself doing? Do you start yelling and running out of the store while slamming the door? Or how do you find yourself reacting?
Well, no, I don't break anything or yell.
Mhm.
I think I tend to go quiet.
Mhm.
I try to get everything together, and I quickly leave the room without causing any attention. To remove myself, to like have a quick exit.
Mhm.
I don't like feeling like the attention's on me.
Okay, so last week when we discussed some of your experiences in high school with other students, you mentioned that there are times when some of the other students were very obvious on their words of being mean to you.
Mhm.
Were there any times when you stood up to these mean students and didn't let your anxiety get the best of you?
Yeah, there was times I stood up for myself and my friends. But it was a small town, and we all grew up with each other. I knew all those kids my whole life,
Mhm.
but they weren't. Everyone like around me is a stranger.
Okay. Miss Mendoza, I feel that you're showing really good insight into the situation. I believe I have a technique that we can use today that can help when you feel shame or anxiety, to help put things into a new perspective if you're ever in a similar situation in the future. Would you want to try it out with me?
Sure, if it helps, I'll try anything.
All right. So I have a piece of paper right here. And there is a type of therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy, which utilizes something called the cognitive triangle. So it looks something like this. Basically, all you have to know is that essentially our thoughts, feelings, and our behaviors are all connected and have an effect on each other, as you can see by the drawings. They all have lines that point to each other. So, another way to explain this is that the way that we think affects the way that we feel, and this affects the way that we behave.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, I guess.
Okay, so we can work this through with some situations to kind of make a little bit more sense. So for example, let's say you're walking into the school library and you sit at one of the tables next to some other students who are in your class. However, as soon as you begin to get comfortable and you place your objects down, they begin laughing. What would be your first initial thought?
Well, I would assume they were laughing at me and I would feel embarrassed.
Okay, so you thought they were mad at you, so you felt embarrassed. What do you think you would do next?
Well, I'd probably leave because it'd be too much for me to handle and I would feel overwhelmed.
Yeah, so something happens to you, and how you respond is what you think. The feelings that surface and what you do is your reaction. What I want to do right now is to challenge you to change that thought process and into having a different feelings and different behaviors. So, if we take the same scenario of you walking into the library and these students seem to be laughing at the same time that you were getting your materials out, can you think of another reason why these students may be reacting and laughing this way?
Well, when I was getting settled, someone in the group maybe made a joke at the same time and it had nothing to do with me.
Yeah, that can very well definitely be a reason. When you go to the library, do you often see friends hanging out and talking a lot?
Yeah, I see them all the time working on their phones or chatting.
Yeah, exactly. These students were just probably joking as usual. Many students go to the library or even Starbucks to kind of calm down and relax after a stressful test or a stressful class. Okay, so that's going to be your new thought, that they were joking. What would you then feel?
I guess I'd feel relieved that they weren't making fun of me.
Yeah.
But also a little curious to see what they were laughing at.
Yeah, that makes sense. So if you were a little curious about what they were laughing at, what action do you think that you could do to respond to this situation? Maybe even implementing the strategies we discussed previously to work through that social anxiety.
I strike up a conversation with them to see what they were laughing at, or maybe if they wanted to work on our papers together.
Yeah, I think that is a great response. Okay, so this is almost the same situation that occurred with you in Starbucks, but with a different thought process. Instead of them laughing at you, they were laughing at a joke. And this made you feel different, either embarrassed or curious, causing you to either leave or sit down. You didn't interact with anyone any differently. All you did was change your thought process.
I thought differently and changed the way I felt initially. It was a more positive outcome.
Exactly. It was a very different outcome on this hypothetical. So how about we apply the same technique to a different situation? One where someone may not be nice to you and may be trying to see the best way to deal with this kind of situation. You mentioned previously that you felt nervous to eat in the cafeteria as there are many people around and sometimes you feel like you're in the way. Let's say this time you are in the cafeteria and you're waiting on your turn to make a sandwich, and someone behind you becomes frustrated with the long line and they very meanly tell you to hurry up and they continue being impatient. What would be going on through your head?
Well, I don't know. I guess I would feel attacked that they I feel attacked and that they should not be doing this.
Yeah, if someone is being rude to you and you understand that this isn't right, how would that make you feel?
Well, I kind of will start getting mad too. And I'm shy, but I would still want to stick up for myself.
Sticking up for yourself is great. We discussed a minute ago about your high school experience and you having more confidence to stick up for yourself and others. How do you feel that you handle those situations?
I think I handled those situations pretty well. I mean, it wasn't easy, but I knew they weren't right to act like that.
Yeah, so you were brave and you stood up for yourself and your friends. That's an amazing thing to practice. Okay, so in this situation, you're beginning to feel angry that the student will not leave you alone. What will you do next?
Well, I'd probably tell them to leave me alone, and we've all been here waiting in the line patiently, not just them. And if I felt more mad, I'd probably remove myself from the situation and not because I would be anxious, but because I wouldn't want to hear them being mean.
Yeah, that makes sense. Why would you want to listen to someone who's being mean for no reason? If we apply the same cognitive triangle process that we use for the library example, what other thoughts could you tell yourself about the situation?
Well, I just think that they probably had a bad day and weren't taking it out on, and they were just taking it out on everyone else, even though we weren't the cause of it. I could also try to ignore them because I know it isn't about me. I just was in their targeting.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at things. Instead of taking the things this person was saying personally, you would realize it had nothing to do with you, although it is not fair that they were saying this kind of stuff to you. So, how would this make you feel?
Well, if it had nothing to do with me, although I may feel annoyed, I mostly just try and shrug it off, and I don't know because I don't know them, and it doesn't matter after this interaction.
Okay, so it seems you would kind of feel indifferent to their actions. So, what would you do?
Well, once I would get my food, I'd probably move somewhere else so I wouldn't have to listen to them.
Yeah, that's very good, Miss Mendoza. If something like this occurs, it's best to remove yourself from this type of situation, especially if you don't know this person and you might not know how they would react.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, so Miss Mendoza, part of this reframing technique is putting this into action in real life situations. For example, the next time you are in a similar situation to any of the ones we discussed today, I want you to practice this cognitive triangle technique. Focus on what you might be thinking in the moment, and then how this might be affecting the way that you feel and the way that you behave. If you are ever in a situation that is too intense and you cannot go through this process in your head, you can think to yourself, I better get out of this situation and walk away. So how do you feel about this process?
I guess it makes sense, and I have to be aware that I'm not the only person that I've seen today. So that although I do feel that they're mad at me, if they haven't told me anything or done something to me, I should try not to take it so personally. Every story has a different truth, and my actions are dependent on my thoughts. So I should not have I should have a less worried thought process.
Yes, that's exactly it. It's a process that takes a lot of practice. But do you think you can take a shot at this?
Yes, ma'am, I think I can.
Okay, that's great. So before we meet for our next session, I wanted to ask if you would like to keep the same goal of sitting at Starbucks, or do you prefer we aim for something a bit smaller?
I like the idea of studying somewhere other than my room. Since it helps me get out of my dorm, maybe I can try the library. The second floor has a lot of desks to work alone.
The library is an excellent option. I think that this can really help surround yourself with more students, but not necessarily feel in the way like you mentioned before. I think this can be our next goal for you, Miss Mendoza.
Okay, sounds good. I will try to meet the next goal for the next time.
I have complete faith in you, Miss Mendoza, and it seems that we're out of time today, but I feel that we've made really good progress. Until we meet again next week, I want you to keep this technique in mind if you are ever in a situation where you might become anxious.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Miss Mendoza.